M2 MacBook Air. Perhaps the most discussed laptop of this year. So many contradictions, disadvantages, and at the same time advantages that we haven't seen in any MacBook available. I've used it for a month, and today I'm ready to tell you, how was it? Is it really as bad as it seemed at first, or did Apple do a great job and the first impression was deceptive? Let's find out. I would like to start with the most pleasant thing, the updated design. For me, as a user of the 16-inch MacBook Pro, this design didn't bring any new sensations because 16-inch and M2 Air are not much different, it's just basically smaller. But here's my point. For the price, the look and feel will certainly satisfy, I believe, any user. The 14 and 16-inch MacBooks are priced from $2,000, while a similar MacBook with the M2 chip is only $1,200. Plus, it's lighter, more compact, really cannot say anything bad about the design. Almost. And this almost is the small scratches on the body, especially on the ports. But I guess you already know the solution, which is take the classic silver or use a case. And with the new design, we got MagSafe back, which is extremely convenient. The good old MagSafe, which once saved my Mac from death. The display is also great. It's now larger compared to the previous M1 Air model. Bezels are thinner, but the notch in Apple laptops confuses me. The new display is 100 nits brighter than that of the M1 Air, which looks good on paper but really doesn't play an important role in day-to-day use. And if you compare the two laptops head to head, the difference is, I mean, you probably won't notice the difference, but it's still brighter and it's a good thing. But enough about the upsides, let's talk about the downsides. And right away, I would like to start with the loudest Apple mistake according to almost all media and YouTubers. One NAND chip in the base M2. Is this really that bad? You know, no. Not at all. On paper, the 256 gig SSD is indeed slower. And for some tasks, SSD speed may not be fast enough, but for what tasks? This slower SSD is still fast. And if you buy the M2 Air for its intended purposes like writing, surfing the web, watching movies, and okay, some light graphic tasks, you will not even encounter some kind of restrictions. That's because the limitations are noticeable only when you load the Mac from head to toe. Like editing heavy videos, opening huge projects in Xcode, for example, or, I don't know, 3D modeling. And in the background you have 50 tabs in Google Chrome open, and at the same time you watch a tutorial and talk with your friend on FaceTime. That is, you know what I mean? The target audience of this Mac most probably will not face such kind of tasks, therefore they will not feel the difference in one NAND chip. In short, relax. Do not perceive this flaw as YouTubers do. Although, on the other hand, I did it too, so, well, here I can justify myself that it was a first impression then, and now, yeah, my opinion has changed. One NAND chip is not a problem. To begin with, I didn't pick up the M2 Air as a replacement for my 16-inch MacBook Pro, it's more about an additional laptop for simpler tasks. I'm not ready to sell my 16-inch Pro, at least because the two devices have completely different use cases. If the Pro is about power, the Air is more about lightness and portability. For example, I tried to make this video on my two MacBooks, and I gotta say, M2 Air did a great job with this task. But editing on this MacBook is only an experiment in the framework of this video. MacBook Air is not designed for these tasks, but even so, the Mac copes with simple video editing really well. Especially when it comes to editing in DaVinci Resolve. Premiere, even 2 years after the release of Apple Silicon, is not fully optimized. The main point is that you can easily edit a simple video from a trip or a vlog for YouTube, but enough about video editing. Enough. Look, do I really need to tell you that working with documents on the new Mac does not bring any problems, and that typing on it is a pleasure? I mean, it's obvious, right? The updated keyboard with the Touch ID does its job perfectly. The only thing you might have questions about is web surfing. Here is a brand new Winer series called Helping a Stranger on the Internet. But first, I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Atlas VPN. Imagine you are sitting with your MacBook in a coffee shop, working. And you get a brilliant idea. I'm gonna connect to the local Wi-Fi and watch an episode of Rick and Morty on Netflix, and then log into my personal account, enter my card details, and buy an app I've been wanting to get. And then I realized that I cannot watch Rick and Morty because there is a geo restriction, and my data has been leaked because I've been connected to the public Wi-Fi the whole time. So it turns out that you should have been using Atlas VPN to protect your data and yourself. Atlas VPN is a tool for your devices that encrypts your data and hides your virtual location. It also protects you from spying, public Wi-Fi dangers, and hides your IP address and your online activities. When you connect to a VPN server, your device is given a new DNS and IP address. This way, a virtual private network makes all of your internet traffic travel through an encrypted tunnel. This keeps you safe and has the bonus of giving you access to websites and media at any of Atlas VPN servers. Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus all have geo restrictions due to licensing rights. This means that hundreds of exclusive shows or even the streaming services may not be available to you based on your location. With Atlas VPN, you can bypass these restrictions and access your favorite content from across the world. To unlock your favorite content with Atlas VPN, you simply connect to the server of the country of which library you want to unlock, for example, the UK, then reload Netflix, and now the library of UK Netflix should be available. And it works on Mac, Windows, iOS, and Android, so you can stay secure on all of your devices. Plus, with Atlas VPN Data Breach Monitor, you can see if any of your emails, passwords, or other sensitive information have been involved in any data breaches. Right now, Atlas VPN is running a huge discount. It means you can get a 3-year subscription for just $1.83 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Time is running out, so get your deal by clicking the link in the video description below. The guy asks whether he could handle 400 tabs on the M1. For the 2K12 MacBook Air, it was just fine. I'm certainly not the kind of person who opens even 50 tabs in a browser, but nonetheless, of course you can do it on the M2. Some have even tried to run 6,000 tabs, which was an impossible challenge for the M2 MacBook, but 6,000 tabs? Really? Okay, where was I going with this? You may experience problems with professional tasks, but when it comes to everyday things like surfing, even 1,000 tabs will open without any problems. So, a stranger from the internet, problem solved. But we have another audience on the list, and this is IT giants coders. I'm not a coder, not even close, but I can say with confidence that the M2 Air is an excellent choice for Microsoft Visual Code or Sublime Text tool, for example, but it's something to be expected because it's a kind of a note-taking software. But what about Xcode? Based on the opinions of experienced coders, I can highlight the following nuances. Everything is quite fast. The Xcode benchmark shows us about 120 to 140 seconds. That's really fast. But it's only for the first run. When the benchmark was run for the second time, it showed a result of 400 plus seconds, and that's already too slow. But why is this happening? There is one catch. The test was done right under the sunlight on the M2 Air in midnight color. Midnight, as we know, is practically black. As the author says, if he had a silver MacBook, this would have worked to its advantage, and the silver color would have reflected the sunlight, which wouldn't have heated the MacBook to such high temperatures. And talking about throttling, is everything as bad as it might seem at first glance? No. The fact is that in order for the processor to start dropping its frequencies, you need to heat it up like crazy. This happens either because of demanding applications or when working under the sun. So does color matter? It turns out that it does. But this is also a bit of a stretch as far as I'm concerned. Who is going to work under the direct sunlight? Coding? Editing videos? It seems to me that you yourself will start dropping your frequencies working in these conditions. That's why the throttling is also kind of just the loud cries of people who managed to load their machine so much that the computer had nothing to do but to reset its power. I didn't notice any dramatic difference in photo editing. If you compare it to the M1 Air, the difference is extremely insignificant. Still, you can work in Photoshop without problems, but as long as you do not load the project with a huge number of layers or do not open a photo in extremely high resolution, here M2, like its predecessor, does not show any incredible results. It's workable, so the experience is great, but it's not for heavy tasks. Well, in case you're wondering, I ran a few games on the new M2 MacBook Air, and on the one hand, playing games on MacBooks is inherently doomed to fail because, as we know, MacBooks are not designed for such actions, but Apple puts a lot of effort into developing the Apple Arcade, where you can play games both on your iPhone and iPad and drumroll on your MacBook. And it all sounds great, but in reality, I have a few questions for Apple. The NBA, for example. On my iPhone, I can safely run it and play smoothly. It doesn't slow down at all, except for when I play for a very long time. The iPad with the M1 does the same job without any problems. But the MacBook is something strange. Basically, you run a mobile game on a computer and it slows down. Not always, but if it doesn't slow down when you launch it, sooner or later it will. For some reason, the Mac is getting really hot. The Mac felt much hotter than all the other devices, and yeah, some games are clearly better, and maybe this is not Apple's fault, but rather the optimization of the games, but nevertheless, gaming on a MacBook is still not the best case to use this device. One more thing that makes me happy is the sound. The sound coming from the M2 Air, despite the fact that the speakers are hidden, got really better compared to the M1 Air, and watching movies is also much more pleasant than it was before. And the experience of using the display of the M2 Air felt somewhat better compared to its predecessor M1 Air. Even though it's only 0.3 inches larger, in reality it feels like a 14-inch laptop, and it's amazing. Now, 60 Hz versus 120 Hz. Personally, for me, it's more of an upside than a downside. At 60 Hz, the Air consumes less power, and the difference between 60 and 120 in the MacBook Pros is, you get used to this high frequency really fast, just as fast as you get used to 60. And it's not something I really need, and actually anyone needs. It's just a more pleasant experience, not a necessity. The point is, if you want to save money, just go with the 60 Hz and don't sweat it. The nice thing I want to point out is the power efficiency. It's almost the same compared to the M1 Air. And it may seem like a lack of progress, but if you dive deeper, it got thinner, lighter, it has a more powerful M2 chip, and yet the battery life has remained the same. On average, it's enough for a full day of active use, which is about 7 to 9 hours. To summarize, the M2 Air is a great laptop, and after a month of use, I recommend it for purchase, even in its basic config. However, you should keep in mind that the M2 Air is not suitable for professional work in graphics-heavy applications. And the M1 Air is a great laptop as well that is still in stock, and you can get it on Apple's website for $200 less, thereby saving money. But if you want to experience the new design or you have an Intel MacBook, then go with the M2 Air, you won't regret it. I think the M2 is really good for what it's designed for, and if you don't agree with me or you have something to add, let me know in the comments. And don't forget that Atlas VPN is running a huge discount, a 3-year subscription for just $1.83 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Time is running out, so get your deal by clicking the link in the video description below. In the meantime, if you like this video, click on this video and this one, and see you in the next one.